All right, it's Aisha Sultan with the St. Louis Post-Dispatch is with us, along with David Stokes from the Show Me Institute. Good morning, David Stokes.
Good morning, Mr. Milhaven. Good morning, Aisha.
Good morning.
I like talking TIFs with you. What's this Bass Pro TIF going on here? What's going on there?
Well, we've got an op-ed published in the Springfield Business Journal by an intern of the Show Me Institute, Will Reynolds, and it's a good story. Bass Pro is really a great American success story. Unfortunately, it's sort of a modern success story because a lot of it involves subsidies as well. It's a company it's a Missouri-based company. It's a leader in its field. Mm-hmm. It's growing across the nation, and all this is fabulous. Just unfortunately, much of the growth is fueled by tax increment financing and subsidies.
What are you talking about? These are guys who love their guns and love to fish and all against government intervention and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's sort of the ironic part of the story. that's what makes it sort of interesting. You do have that sort of that dichotomy there, and you've got 5 Bass Pro stores in Missouri now. Several of them were built without TIF. Obviously, the original Springfield one, which was done before these subsidies were common.
Right.
But they built one in Columbia a decade ago without it because the city fathers in Columbia simply chose not to. But when they built one in St. Charles, despite opposition from the county government in St. Charles, the city gave them an enormous TIF a decade ago.
Now, we can't hold Bass Pro accountable or criticize them for taking advantage of a great business situation for them. It's the government officials here that granted the TIF that deserve some scrutiny. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, you should come to work at the Show Me Institute.
I
completely agree.
Like, I don't know that we necessarily need to. I mean, Bass Pro could be any company just making a smart business decision. But what's going on? What was the rationale for granting this TIF? Would they have gone somewhere else?
Well, I think Bass Pro does use these types of subsidies more than many other companies. I mean, we did some.
But are we going to tell a business, no, you can't use something that's a competitive advantage to you?
Why?
I mean, shouldn't the questions be then focused on the government officials granting the TIFs?
Yes, and we like to praise city officials like in Columbia who chose not to, or in St. Charles County and St. Louis County, where they tried to do this, exercise a great deal of discipline with it. And that is the government is the problem. The government needs the one that needs to fix it. The legislature, which doesn't give the TIFs but authorizes, needs to correct the changes. It's something McGraw and I have been talking about for years.
What I find
that said, the company still deserves some criticism.
What I find fascinating is that let's take Chesterfield Valley, which was one big giant TIF.
Flood.
Right. One flood, and then it was a TIF. That TIF those bonds were sold off like, I want to say 25 years early. I mean, that's how successful that was, that they paid off all those bonds early, which means they really didn't need the TIF in the first place.
Well, that's what we've talked about. I mean, exactly, McGraw. It's not a justification for saying the TIF worked because we paid it off in 10 years instead of 23.
Right.
It's real justification is you didn't need it at all, and you just took other people's money.
And your numbers that you projected, you jerry-rigged them so that you showed like you really needed this TIF, but you really undervalued your numbers to make it look like you needed a TIF when you really didn't need the TIF.
Absolutely. I mean, every TIF is supposed to prove that it wouldn't happen without the assistance. And in the history of Missouri, you've never had, out of the 600 or 700 TIF proposals we've had, there's never been one where the urban planners came back and said, oh, nope, you don't need the TIF. Well, I mean, they say you need it every time.
Right.
And they've never come back and said, we didn't need it, let's just do away with it, or let's give you guys back the money that we said we needed type of deal.
Right. And
no clawback provision.
And they would say that the best thing that does come from it is when it works, and I put that in air quotes there, it does get paid off early, and the businesses go on the tax rolls faster than planned.
David, we're not going to have enough time. Maybe we can revisit this again next week. But all last week, everyone's trying to tell everyone who has lower taxes. Texas has lower taxes. Missouri has lower taxes. We've had dueling governors on this show. How can we figure out who actually has lower taxes when you add it all up?
Well, it's hard. I mean, and depending on the style of taxes, and I do comparative taxation all the time, it gets really tricky, particularly for property taxes. Mm-hmm. Judging property taxes, you have to know how one state appraises and then assesses it and then levies the tax. Every state does it very differently. And I say that Texas does have higher property taxes in general than Missouri. But part of that is because the property in Texas is probably more valuable than Missouri.
Well, also
so
there's no state income tax. So in Texas.
Oh, absolutely. Income taxation's a little easier to compare because every state bases their state income tax on the federal system. So you at least have an apples-to-apples comparison when you go state to state.
But does it matter? I mean, so Texas has no property, no income tax. They have a higher sales tax. We have a lesser sales tax. And so back and forth. I mean, ultimately, in the end, how do you draw the line and say Texas has a higher tax rate or Missouri has a higher tax rate?
Well, you really have to get into the weeds, and it can be very difficult. And the sales tax example is a good one, because for the people saying Texas has a higher sales tax, if they added the word state in, then they were correct, because they do have a higher state sales tax.
Right.
But our local income taxes in Missouri are generally higher. So the average sales tax is about the same, at least in the urban areas.
Right.
So it gets real tricky.
Can you look at like the overall tax burden of one state compared to another? Have you done that?
You can, and the Tax Foundation is a group that does it a lot in a nonpartisan way.
And
but even they miss some of the really detailed stuff. It's impossible to do it for all 50 states without using some generalities.
Well, and Missouri has the property tax, so that they tax your boat and your car. But Texas has that. What's that? They tax bonds, don't they? It's
Well, I don't have bonds in Texas.
But there's some type of tax. It's a personal super property or in something like a intangible property tax of some kind. So I mean, they have all those goofy taxes. Can we send you on a mission to answer that question for us for next week?
I would love to. That would be fun.
That's David Stokes. We're out of time. When can we read you? When can we see you?
You can read a lot of stuff on comparing Missouri to Kansas and other area states at showmeinstitute.org, and follow me on Twitter at David C. Stokes.
9 o'clock, KTRS, St.